Hello, and welcome back for another amazing conversation today. This is AfroAnimation 2.0, and welcome to Drawing Ourselves, Being Black in Animation. Before we jump in, we want to thank the AfroAnimation sponsors of today's panel, DreamWorks Animation. My name is Stevie Carter, pronoun she, her, and I'm a production executive at Netflix, and I oversee development for our animated features. And I'm so thrilled to talk to our impressive panelists for the topic that's dear to my heart. We have so much to discuss, so I just want to jump right in and start with just some introductions. So we'll start with Adrian.
Hello, my name is Adrian Bob. I'm the creator of Exocentric Productions. I'm a writer, director with 15 years in the VFX animation and video game industries. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be on the panel.
Amazing, you're a Renaissance man, I like that. And I'm gonna bring in, this one's interesting because there are brothers. Maybe we can bring in Justin and then I'll go to Chris.
My name is Justin Copeland. I've been in animation for just about 12 years. I started as a storyboard artist at Marvel, then went to Warner Brothers, where I also was promoted to director of DVD features. Ran a couple shows with my brother, and now we're in development at DreamWorks on a feature. So yeah, thanks for having us. This is dope.
Welcome. Yeah, and Chris, come on in.
He said it.
He
it's
said
all
it.
of that.
Does that happen between you guys? Brother competition? Y'all fight? No.
he has 5 kids. He and his wife had 5 kids. Me and my wife had 4. So he won.
Wow. That's quite the competition, but that's fun.
That's it. But yeah, same. I think I came out to LA maybe 6 or 7 months before Justin did. So everything that he said, directing, started off as a storyboard artist. But yeah, now directing and development at DreamWorks feature.
That's amazing, and congratulations on you both. And we have Fred Nolan, and he'll jump in a little bit, but we're just going to go ahead and get started.
Sweet.
So, we're going to start with you guys all have unique paths. I just want to see, what is your journey? What inspired you to get started in animation in this industry? It's so beautiful seeing all your faces. How did we get here? Adrian, you want to kick us off?
Sure. It's one of those weird trajectories. I actually went to school for fine arts, visual arts, specifically in illustration and medical illustration specifically. And even as a kid, I was drawing dinosaurs and aliens and robots, just literally the moment I could write, probably a little earlier than that. So it just made a lot of sense that I would go into the arts and kind of explore that more. And my first way in was as a storyboard artist for a few History Channel shows. And during then, I wasn't taught anything digital at that point. So I was entirely traditional. And I just went into Photoshop, started teaching myself. That was like a chain of events that led to ZBrush because I had a sculpting background. That led me into more 3D, started working for Ubisoft, then started working for a ton of other shows, worked on The Expanse for a couple of years, just recently finished some work for Mars Studios on Moon Knight. So it's been crazy. And it's not at all what I trained for, but it's definitely the kind of stuff I've always loved to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's just also just a great story to show, like, there's no right path. It's
non-linear.
It's a bunch of wrong paths that are all the right.
Exactly. Yeah. But the thing, my North Star was my passion, because I just needed to tell stories visually, and whether it was with a pencil or with a stylus, I just had to do it. So it brought me to the right place in the end.
Yeah. No, that's great. And actually, I want to ask somebody else who's going to welcome here. Fred, come on in. Fred's late to the party. He likes to show up a little late when it gets started. Fred, what's up? Hi.
I just wanted to make sure you guys were warmed up.
Yes, we're getting the crowd ready for you. Fred, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? And then I'm going to hammer you guys with some questions. We're all going to chat, hang out, have a good time. So who are you, Fred? Tell us a little bit about you.
Fred Nolan, Oakland-based visual storyteller.
Amazing. And we're going to get to know more about that. So Fred, we're also talking about everyone's inspirations, how we all got here. We're Black folks in animation. Ain't it special? So we want to figure out what inspired everybody here. So I'll start with Chris, what inspired you, or Justin, you guys? I don't know if we're tag team. I'm going to separate you out. So,
Justin and I, we came up, born and raised in Chicago. And the thing about Chicago is like, you don't know what industry. You love drawing, but you're like, there's no industry in Chicago that you can jump into other than tagging. Like, and that's not that good of a lucrative of an industry to jump into as an artist doing graffiti. But we started off trying to break into comic books, and we would go to different comic conventions, and it was great because you're meeting the individuals that are drawing these things that you're so enamored by, and what it did is it sort of challenged you to put down more art, to just draw. And so we tried that for a few years, and as we began to get momentum, we began meeting some folks, a lot of homies. Phil Barraza, lead designer of the Young Justice series at Warner Brothers. Joaquin Dos Santos, who is the TV animation guy. You start meeting these guys online, and they're going, "Hey man, you should try to get into animation." And so that happened to me. They were just going like, "Your style and everything you do is so animated. Like you should move out to LA and try to get in." And so in 2009. My wife and I, with our 1-year-old, we had like $3,500. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go out there. At least I'll be in the proximity. A year before that, I was invited to Warner Brothers studio by Phil Barraza, and he was just like, "Hey man, you should come here and just sort of meet people and sort of see what it's like." So, getting that experience and being in the studio, it was unbelievable. So. Fast forward to that year later when my wife and I decided to move out here, I said, you know what, I'll get whatever jobs I need to get. I had applications for Rouse and Sam's Club or whatever. Yep. I was just like, I'll get some jobs and then I'll just draw at night. The day after I moved out here, Joaquin Dos Santos, he sent me a text message and he was just like, "Hey man, it was really cool meeting you. You seem like a really cool guy. You're really talented." He's like, "I can't promise you anything, but I feel like if you moved out to LA, you'd have a better chance of getting in." And I go, "Homie, I moved out here yesterday." And he's like, "My producer's gonna call you." Click. He hangs up, and sure enough, Bobby Page, shout out to Bobby, the producer at Warner Brothers TV. She called me up, and they offered me a job as a storyboard revisionist at Warner Brothers. And so that was the start of my career. I came out. My desire was to do character design, and then Joaquin said, "Hey man, look. There's only a few character designers per studio. It's a hard one to get into." He was like, "Honestly, I think you should get into storyboarding." He's like, "Nobody wants to flirt around with 2D action storyboard. It breaks people." Like, and I was like, "Yo, sign me up. Let's go." And that was the kickoff for me. So 2009, I got thrown into the storyboard pit, and 12 years later, I'm more addicted than I ever been.
You're still here. And then did you call Justin? And Justin, what happened? Did you say, "My brother's gone to LA. He's living his best life"? What's up?
Not far. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point of view of that story is we were kind of at a crossroads. We couldn't break into comics because it's a weird industry. And we were sort of like just looking for something else. Like I knew since I was 5 that I was going to be a film director. That was my job. That was my goal. Growing up though in poverty, I mean, I don't have a camera, so we had to find another way for that visual outlet. And our uncle would send us boxes of comics and we would just read through them. We're like, "Yo, this stuff is dope, man." And we just started drawing. It wasn't anything. There's no magical talent fairy, we just started drawing, and to us, it looked great, And from there, excuse me, we, like Chris said, tried to break into comics. I was in film school at one point. It was very expensive. I could no longer attend. I couldn't afford it. But just never stopped drawing and going to different conventions and meeting tons of people. That was like the most important part. We thought we were going there to try to find jobs, but the best thing that happened was just meeting that tribe, meeting that community. Yeah. And I see in the comments, people already linking up, that's the best thing you could do. Yeah. So this dude is like, "Yo, man, I'm moving out to LA." And I'm like, "No, you ain't." Cause he always would say that. He'd be like, he was moving somewhere all the time. I'm going to move here, da. I'm like, all right. I mean, I don't think he is, but we'll see. So then one day we get all the way to the point where we're having their going away dinner. It's just his family and my family. We were really small at the time. We hug and all this other stuff, and they drive off. And I'm sitting in the middle of the street, and I'm like, this fool really leaving.
That was a big prank. You thought he was going to go around the block, come back.
Can you tell who the younger crazy brother is?
I'm starting to pick up on the psychology on this.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, wow, he's taking a risk, and I'm very, excuse me, I'm not risk averse. I'm always trying to plan things out, and he's just like, sometimes you got to jump, man, you know. So he flew out to LA. I came to visit a few months later. It wasn't even that long, and while I was there, I had my portfolio, just a bunch of comic drawings from years and years of trying to break in, and folks at the studio were looking at it and they're like, yo, man, you get a job in 2 minutes if you moved out here. So went back home, and my wife and I were talking. We need to sacrifice a baby goat, get rid of all that stuff, do whatever we got to do to get out here, pray. And it turned out it was like the right time. And I came out a few weeks later. Some of the folks I had met at that Warner Brother visit moved on to Marvel and were like, we need board artists. Can you do it? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And that was it. And from there, it's all about, you know, once I got in there, I almost got fired a few times. It's a very scary thing. I got 2 kids. I got a wife.
Yeah.
But learning the industry, learning everything you can, and then seeing how you fit, or seeing, can you make a niche for yourself as an artist? Because like, there's not a lot of Black folks to follow. You know, we didn't have that person we could look to and be like, that's our, you know, person. And, you know, Joaquin and Phil and all them guys were like, screw that crap, man. You better you better get going, you know. So
draw.
yeah. And from there,
That's
we just kind of
incredible.
you know, learn the ropes.
No, I love that. And I keep hearing from you guys, you say comics are weird. And we have somebody who does comics. So I want to hear a little bit from Fred about the weirdness of comics. No, what's your journey, Fred? Tell us about comics. What inspired you to go that direction? Because I see Adrian had his path. Everyone's taking different directions. What's your direction?
Well, I think I'm a weirdo, so that's why I went with comics, because they are weird. Like
it's adding up. It's starting to add up.
Well, it's funny because like there's not like I think Adrian said like there's not like one path into these things, and that's very similar with comics because like it's such a diffuse thing. Like you can do the superhero route, you can do like that kind of indie memoir kind of thing. You can do whatever else, like science fiction. There's something for everybody. And yeah, I kind of knocked around that scene for a long time before I kind of found like, and I guess I'm just like a glutton for punishment because like I had no success and I just kept coming back for more. It's what my mother used to call giving somebody nothing but face. Like you're like fighting and not putting your hands up and just smack. That was me.
Yeah. I love it.
But yeah, and I eventually found my path. Like my path was like doing like a hybrid between memoir and history comics, and that's worked really well for me. And it's been very inspiring. It's really like made it worthwhile.
No, I love that, and I love that each of you found your own. Well, he'll be back. I promise.
You don't need him. We got
one brother.
It's fine. Yeah,
you got
you'll
one.
be okay.
You got both. It's fine. All of you found your own path, your own direction, and what rung true for me is not seeing yourself, not knowing this is a path when you're young. Because I think when you're coming up, when I told my parents I work in animation, they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." Like for kids, and they didn't really understand, you know, the power of that. So it's just so amazing now to have a room like this and people can really see, you know, there's a path. We're here. There's more room for everybody. But holding true that we didn't grow up with that, and you know, seeing the stories. I don't know if you guys feel, but I didn't see myself very often. I didn't see myself anywhere. I just assumed that was the norm. And now we're seeing some great content come out. So I'm just curious, you know, what animation, you know, what stories we've been so excited to see, and what stories are left to tell. I think there's so many, but is there any ideas here of what you'd like to see for our stories being told?
I think, I mean, I'll just say, I feel like it's the thing that rings true constantly is, you know, getting Black and just diverse faces to be able to tell anything, to tell any story, just being a part of the rhythm of the industry. That was, for a while, that was sort of the goal, right? Like, it's just like, damn, if we can just be represented just in a general sense. And then you sort of get in there and it's the, and now what? You know what I mean? It's the, and now what of it all? And I think, and I've gotten this question a lot of times from younger talent where they're just sort of like, do you feel responsible for telling the Black experience? And I'm like, hell no. Like, I don't feel responsible for living the Black experience. I feel responsible as a Black man for living my experience and telling my story. And so, you know, as I grow, as Justin and I learn and evolve, you know, now being directors and development on a feature, it's very different than storyboarding and TV. Now in this position, we have a lot more of the creative space to tell the stories and to build the characters and build the worlds in the way that we want to do it. And the only thing that we constantly are going to and are constantly, shout out to Suzanne and Shabrea, our producers, our phenomenal women that are in leadership with us. They're constantly pointing back to us and going like, what is your perspective on that thing? How do you feel about that thing? What do you want to say about that thing? And so now I guess to answer your question in short, I feel responsible to tell my story, which is the story of a Black kid from Chicago who has a lot of experience in a lot of different ways, and I want to put that on the screen or in the stories that I tell, for sure.
Yeah, we're absolutely not. We're not one monolithic group. We have many experiences, many stories, and there's stories that are still yet to be told.
Absolutely.
You know, Fred, I know you're working on a comic specifically telling a story of Major Taylor. What inspired you to tell a story we haven't heard before? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, it's exactly because like we hadn't heard it before. You know, I've been an avid cyclist for 20 years now, and I'd never heard of Major Taylor until I encountered one of the Major Taylor cycling clubs up here in the Bay Area. And, you know, I saw their jerseys and I'm just like, I'd see them around. I'm like, who is this? Like, what's this Major Motion thing? And I looked it up and I'm like, how on earth have we not heard about this guy?
Absolutely.
Like, he's amazing. And he's just like, and there's a few different reasons, you know, like, cycling was as popular as baseball back in the 1800s, and it kind of lost out to the automobile. But you know, there's just no reason, like, you know, he could not be held up as another figure to look up to. Like, he was a guy who, you know, was a devout Christian. He wouldn't race on Sundays. He wasn't a cheater. Like, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, because smoking was very popular with cyclists back then because it was the 1800s. Smoking used to be popular with me as a cyclist. Like, it was a crazy time. But yeah, like he was like this really great guy to look up to. And I was like, we need, like, you know, I can be somebody who can, as a cartoonist, because you can be very DIY with it. That was something that I could bring, like, that's something I could manifest. So I did it as a mini comic, and eventually, like, it continued to sell as a mini comic, and eventually it caught the attention of a publisher, and that's where we are now.
Wow. And that's just one story of amazing Black people in our history that we don't even know. And you're going to bring that to so many other people who get to see that. But how many do we not know? Like, how many stories have we not told? So there's endless stories, I know. Adrian, you know, it's interesting because you are working in a space where you talked about your sci-fi, you're following that path. And, you know, we don't see many Black folks in sci-fi.
We really don't.
No, why do you think that is, or how do you feel about that?
I feel really strongly about it. I feel like, and I don't think it's true in the sense that it's like we're not interested. You know, we totally are. Everyone I grew up around, like, we were all into that space, and yeah, we didn't see ourselves in it, and you know, it tells us a lot about the world we live in that, you know, we weren't in the future. You know, and it had nothing to do with us, our ambitions or our aspirations. It was entirely just the culture we live in. And I think, you know, sci-fi is a genre about ideas. Like, it's the whole idea is about breaking convention, breaking the norms, breaking kind of, you know, what's considered default or normative. And it just seems so strange that, you know, even in the past couple decades, we're still doing 80s and 90s stories for the most part. So I feel like I've always been really strong about, you know, pushing forward with that space and that genre. And you know, it is also one of those weird things where it's like you see Black Panther and then everyone's shocked. It's like, what? I didn't know this was going to be big. It's like, of course you didn't. You know, we've made Robin Hood 5 times. Like, it's, of course there's a reason for that. And you know, it's and it comes from just this sense that we've always been overlooked. We've never been, you know, taken seriously as beyond just, you know, realism stories, which are absolutely true and important. We also dream about the future. We also dream about the past. We also dream about our you know, myth and legends and all of those sorts of things. We have all of that. We're humans. We have the full spectrum. you know, and yet we're always kind of assumed to just tell, you know, tragedy porn for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Absolutely.
like, you know, and it's like, and again, those are part of our stories, but they're not all our stories. We have so much to offer. And for me, that's always been a big part of that, is like using sci-fi to kind of, you know, shed light on, you know, some of these normative things that we take for granted, that we just assume are worldwide, that are universal, and they're not. And, you know, using, whether that be robots and aliens and all of that sort of stuff, to really kind of turn all of those ideas on its head. That's what sci-fi was made for. So it feels strange that there's just an assumption that we shouldn't be in this space, and that you know, Afrofuturism is just futurism. It's
just the future.
You know, we're most of the planet. Why wouldn't we think about what we're like in the future? And we have so much range, you know.
I just want to do a quick follow-up to that. I think it's always amazing. I was inspired by Steven Spielberg and James Cameron. Those are my dudes back in the day. Yeah. I watched The Abyss and Aliens and wanted to just I knew what I wanted to do, you know. And there's something about sci-fi too. It's still probably to this day the most expensive form of filmmaking. Costs so much money. My approach though is always sort of like James Cameron, where it doesn't need to. You know, it's just we lose our imagination, you know, once somebody waves dollars at us. But whenever something is that expensive, we're immediately left out of that conversation. And so we're not able to tell that type of stories. Like, why don't you go do Boys in the Hood? Because you can just get a camera and walk around your neighborhood. That's your life anyway. You might as well da-da-da. And it's like, yeah, it is. But I'm sort of trying to escape that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Hollywood's always capitalizing on Black pain, Black struggle, Black trauma. I'm like, what about Black joy? What about people who are looking for the future? Are people living their best lives? Like, let's celebrate that. So,
Agent said drama porn. It's like, yo, come on, man. And you know, and like I said, I just real quick, I feel like we can fit. I mean, if you took the Alien franchise and you changed that lead character to a Black woman, that's not like, don't do it cheap and whack. No. Like, if you respect the culture and you respect her story enough, you can take that franchise and tell it from a different perspective, right? Yeah. And so it's not only sort of inclusivity, it's financially feasible for the industry to go like, how many different ways can we tell these stories? And so, you know, becoming addicted to the thing that sort of is your minimized, simple perspective of it, becoming addicted to that, although financially sustainable in some weird way, apparently they say it that way, it's not financially feasible in the way that telling new diverse stories from new diverse perspectives is. So it feels really exciting to be able to take the James Camerons and the Steven Spielberg perspectives and ideas and go like, yo, if I was on that ship, what would I have done? You know what I mean? And again, that goes back to what I said at the beginning, is my perspective. And it's going to be different because it's culturally different for sure.
Right. But the appeal will be universal because everybody wants to experience the same thing, the same ways of creativity, movies, film. We're all drawn to the same things, but there's a fresh take on it when we see ourselves, when we see different parts of ourselves in there.
Yep.
So I love that.
The same, but different. I love it.
Yes. And you know, you all talked about seeing yourselves and the joy you want to see. I'm curious, Justin, is there a type of movie or character that you want to see now in the future, given your appreciation for all those big filmmakers in the past?
Wow.
Yeah, what are we missing, Justin? Figure it out. No, that's a hard question.
This is the question from a development executive.
You tell me how to do my job.
Now you're like, come on, what's the nugget? I think that one of the things that I think we're starting to capitalize on is, you know, when I watch movies like Indiana Jones, one of my favorite films, what were we doing in that time? What were we experiencing in the 1940s? Or, you know, just like when we talk about Major Taylor, I learned about that dude from a Hennessy commercial. I'm like, what? Look at this brother. And I love history. I'm a history fanatic because you can find so many stories. And I just think we need to just bring in our point of view of history. You know, we are people who had to survive, you know, and claw and fight. So what did that look like, you know? But also at the same time, we are the, you know, the offspring of survivors, you know. So
Yeah.
what is now our perspective on something like on the future? When COVID happened, I'm like, you know, this ain't that much different, you know. Growing up in poverty, you know, not going outside because of the violence and all that other stuff, you know, it was for real social distancing back in the day. So like Chris said, what does life look like from those different perspectives? I hate to keep it that vague.
No, it's great.
But I think, I mean, we're missing out, you know. What it's like, what's his name? Jordan Peele said, I don't need to tell stories from the perspective of, you know, a white person, because we've seen those stories over and over again, you know. And I don't necessarily think that way. I feel like I'll tell, you know, any story that I think is great. But at the same time, it does make me wonder, you know, we haven't seen what this person might be feeling or thinking or going through. So I think we need to bring that more to the forefront.
Yeah. And, you know, I think because we don't see enough of ourselves, we do feel this weighted pressure unspoken. Like, oh no, this is the one movie that's going to be out for a while, and I got to do it right. I got to please. It's a lot of weight, and it's a privilege to not have to think about that, but we don't have that privilege, unfortunately. So we always feel that pressure of, can I just tell what I want to tell, or do I have to be an activist? And I want to actually talk to Fred, because, you know, a lot of your work has really strong messaging and activism in there. Do you feel yourself as a storyteller, an activist, a cartoonist in that vein, or do you feel more open and free?
I feel more open and free. I don't feel like an activist. I just feel, you know, that I want to, because I might be a little bit older than you guys. I didn't grow in, but it's still the same. Like, I didn't grow up with those examples. Like, I didn't grow up with like Black history being presented to me. So it didn't feel like something that would be a possibility, like something that I could do. And I want people to have the audacity to be like, yeah, I can tell my story. I can talk about people like me. But I don't think that that's activism. I think I think that's just me as an artist. That's my curiosity as an artist.
You just being you is already.
Getting back to the earlier discussion about like Afrofuturism and like seeing ourselves in the future. Hopefully we'll be there. I
hope so.
I don't know if you guys remember. So 1980 or so, there was like the Richie Rich comedy hour, and like there's Richie Rich, you know, like with Cadbury and his robot servant and stuff and his talking dog. And we had like Black people had like a 30-minute show that was called Rickety Rocket, and it was us in the future with our hoopty. And I was like, what? Like, can't we in the future have a nice rocket? Like,
no, Fred. We broke as hell in the future. Dang. Can't get a break.
I mean, when I was 6,
no reparations in the future.
Right. Yeah. I'm 6 and this is not right.
That's wrong. I want to see whose idea that was. That's what we need to look at.
But, man, how like normative and like accepted that sort of perspective was, and it's weird. It's sort of, I mean, even in some of the content that Justin and I are developing, and I won't say anything to get ourselves jacked up by our producers. I know Shabrea watching, but there are things that are so creatively inspiring that I saw, that I experienced when I was younger, that I'm like, I'm putting that in. That is going to be in it, because I need to let you know that when I saw this thing, it was amazing to me. You know what I mean? Regardless of what the society, you know, personified as normal or cool or whatever. Like, no, when I saw this thing, it blew my mind, and so therefore I am going to put it in here. And so there's a level of creative audacity as a Black man that I'm going like, nah, hell no, this is amazing to me. Like, and I am audacious enough to go like, I am going to see this thing as dope, cool, and interesting, and I'm going to do the work creatively to put it down in that way. So that's where my drawing comes into play. And I'm like, look, this is exactly how I see it, and it's amazing. And then when I show it and go, yo, that's phenomenal, I'm like, see, that was written as not amazing back in the day. There was a level of like, disregard for that. And I'm like, no, that's a part of the Black responsibility that I do feel, to go like, no, the stuff that I saw was cool and dope, and I'm going to let you know how cool and dope it was by doing it myself and showing it to you. And, you know, and there's something really freeing and empowering about that I love. So
I love that too. And I think that there's a lot of perspectives everyone here can bring to the industries we're in. But how are we all? There's a question that kind of relates to this by Kahenya. She said, "We mentioned being Black and sometimes seen as a singular experience. Where do you see the industry going in terms of understanding that Blackness is more than just one thing? How are you all feeling in terms of where you're working, the industry itself? Do you feel like we're getting closer? Are we helping it get there? Are you feeling like there's still some barriers we got to do?" I'll start with Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, I live and have lived in many parts of Canada, so you know, I know what people think when they think of Canada. I know what they feel when they, especially when they hear that I'm from there, you know, and you know, even living here, the commercials, everything, nothing looked like me. But it's not true. There's so many people. There's the Black experience is so rich in Canada, and we have such a major part in it, and there's history here, and none of that is told, none of that is shown, and the people here believe it because that's what media is, right? Like you believe it, and you don't question it the first time you hear that. Oh, this is what history is. 200 years, got it. Moving on, right? But like, I had to seek that stuff out myself. My family, we grew up, you know, we had all of that history in our house. Like we knew what that was. And then when you step out of that and no one else knows, and you tell them these stories and they're just like, what? Oh, what? I didn't know that. And it's just like, of course you didn't, because we didn't learn any of that. We didn't see that on TV. And that's all of how the world sees everything, right? That's how they see us. So it just became this thing where it's like, you know, I'm going to tell those stories where you can see us in the future, where you can see us doing incredible things, and not because it's wish fulfillment, because it's accurate, you know. And I think that's one of those things that I really want to showcase, is that it's, you know, I've seen wish fulfillment, and I've seen, you know, the Supermans, the all of the 007s, those kind of roles, and it's like no one ever questions if those are realistic. But yet, the minute you have a Black astronaut, they're like, I don't know, it doesn't quite. Right. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's
they're doing science at home. They're running the numbers. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought we were just having a movie experience, but okay. Yeah, you know, I hear you on that.
I was just like, meanwhile, I'm going to go over Hero Watch a man that can fly and is bulletproof. And it's like, you know, it just doesn't work that way. And I feel like it just seems like such a missed opportunity. And I mean, you know, also as Black creators, we also don't want to step on anyone's toes, right? We don't want to like say like, oh, like, yeah, like I want to do something that's just full out 10, you know, just the best of us right here on display. We always kind of dial ourselves back because we're usually in a room full of white people for the most part. So, you know, so I feel like at least as I've gotten older, I've kind of pushed past that, because it's just kind of like, no, what? No, I'm going to put my you know, best of myself forward. I'm going to put my best, you know, work forward, and not dial back, because, you know, if I do that, it's just setting a norm, and it's setting that's all they can do, right? That's as far as they can go. So I feel like, as far as representation is concerned, as far as especially the community, people forget we're 3 billion, you know, worldwide. Like, how do you condense all of that into 3 stories that sometimes get shown in 5 years, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the experience is different in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. We're everywhere, you know, and we operate on every class. So I don't understand why we're only, you know, allowed 1 story per year. You know, we have so much, and I just feel like we all have to realize what we're worth, and really stand up, you know, and showcase what we have to bring to the table.
Yeah, no, and I think these conversations like this are what's going to hopefully energize people listening in, and remind ourselves that every story is special and valued. So keep creating. I'm curious, Justin, how did Hollywood feel about when your Chicago came to LA? What was that like? Did you feel that the industry understood the stories you were trying to tell?
I think us telling stories, and like where we are now as directors and producers, that's only recent, you know. Before that, it was just acclimating. It was learning the industry. That is so important. I know, like, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA to be like, rise up. We gotta let's take this mug over and do whatever we, you know, do our thing. So many people when they find out I'm a comic book artist, or I run into, you know, Black folks at comic conventions back, and they're like, you got to tell your own story. You got to tell your own story. I'm like, true, but I need to learn all of everything. You know, I need to learn how the system works and the business of creating. Now, I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm standing on the shoulders of some folks who have, especially, you know, in the last 5 years, have been telling great stories. And so we are more than welcomed in those spaces. They want to hear. In fact, like Chris said, you know, our producers are like, nah, this story is going to take off, the one we're developing. It's going to take off when you add more of yourself into it. And they were so right. But we're so used to sitting back and learning, you know, that it took them to push us out front in order for that to learn. So I find that our stories, you know, are embraced for the most part now. But like I said, we stand on the shoulders of some mighty folks.
It's knowing when it's time to acclimate and when it's time to activate. You know what I mean? It's that thing where you sort of have to do your check in with self. And creatively, I mean, I turned 40 last November, and there was I remember a couple of my homies talking about those big markers when you turn 30 and when you turn 40, and just sort of these questions that you ask yourself: who am I? What am I doing? And why? And you get to a place where your honesty has to, like, it's no longer about the big dream that you have. You sort of, Justin and I, we come from a single mom household on the south side of Chicago, you know what I mean? And like, I didn't even finish high school. And so for us, getting to a place where you're sort of like, dang, I'm out in LA, I am at Warner Brothers, I am doing the thing. Hollywood was like, wait, you know, obviously there was a lot of things going on around us, the energy that was going on around us, from social injustice to this pandemic that relegated us all to it was the greatest lesson in equality that we've ever had, this pandemic. It was like, COVID was like, I don't care what color you are, how rich you are, I will murder you. You're like, okay, cool, I guess we'll go home. You know, with all God bless the dead, you know, not seeking to minimize it. But through all of that, Hollywood sort of had to open its eyes and ears and go like, okay, well, something has to keep moving. Thank God for animation, right? Like the animation industry, we were like, yo, I'm already home doing the thing. But for myself as a 40-year-old Black man with those stories, I had to really gauge and sort of go like, am I doing everything that I can to bring something new and fresh and creative to the industry? And that sort of, that has helped Justin and I tons. And that question for self is very enticing for the industry because it's financially feasible. They're going like, new, fresh, creative, let's go, you know? So that's felt really amazing, being able to engage in some of those meetings and dialogues, and to be able to do it in a way that doesn't feel cheap, doesn't feel shorthand at all in any way.
Yeah, no, and everybody's doing their part. And Adrian, you're wrenching, and the audience really resonated with it about all the types of stories that we should be proud of telling. But Cameron Dillon asked, she'd love to know all of the thoughts on growing popularity for Black-led comics, such as Static Shock, Into the Spider-Verse, Opposite as Always. I'm curious, Fred, coming from the comic world, are you familiar with those comic books? How do you feel about Black-led comics right now?
I think it's awesome. I'm too busy making comics to read any of them, unfortunately.
We support you, but we busy. No. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's happening though. We're seeing everyone's realizing that it's not just film. There's art, there's comics, there's all these avenues. There's new genres. Adrian, we're talking about sci-fi. I mean, we're seeing Westerns on different products. We're seeing all types of things with Black folks. So it's incredible. I want to just have a quick question to Chris. How easy was it from Amotuyi? I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. How easy was it for you to transition from character design to storyboard artist?
Oh God, it was horrible. It was hard because I take medication for my ADHD. My brain, the reason we're out here is because my brain is in 9,000 places at one time. And so the transition was easy only because I wasn't in the industry as a character designer. That was my interest prior to getting in. And the hard part was when you're storyboarding and you're going like, well, as a revisionist, because that's the entry level that I was at that point. You're going, I got to revise if I want to keep my job, which I didn't. I got fired after 5 months at Warner Bros. Because I was terrible. But it was like, because it's the mileage. You're going,
Yep.
I gotta revise 30 of these panels a day at least in order to keep the rhythm and help the production pipeline. So doing that immediately kind of say you have to find a shorthand, a quick shorthand to get these drawings down. As a character designer, ain't no shorthand. Like, I'm spending every second making sure that the lines and the design is there and doing the things that I wanted it to do. So it was rough. ADHD running head first into hurry up and get it done, but slow down and take your time. It was a rough transition, and it took me, like I said, I got laid off at Warner Brothers. Bobby Page hugged me. She said, "You'll be back. Don't worry about it." And I was eventually, but it took me a good amount of time to really figure out this. Going to what Justin said earlier, learning the ropes and really going like, what is it that I'm doing? What am I responsible for outside of the drawing excitement, but the zoomed out pipeline of a production? What am I actually responsible for? And that's something that Justin and I have become very passionate about teaching and talking about with people is outside of the art, what are you responsible for in terms of the bigger team collaboration side of it? So that was my.
No, it's a really great point too, of there's work that has to be done and there's no easy path. I mean, it's just going to take repetition, talent. Talent just doesn't show up. You create that yourself.
Yes.
And then I think the other piece of it too is there is a reality to the business knowledge. How do you break in? What are the jobs that exist? As we were talking about earlier, probably a lot of us didn't know this was a career. And then you get here and show up and everybody already knew. They got their friends, their uncle, their mom's neighbors calling. And I'm like, how do I get in this? I don't know anybody in this field. And I fell in this on accident. So I'm just happy that I found it. But it really is the hard work and the acknowledgement. And now that we're, in a space where we can find each other, meet each other, and you talked about kind of helping others, Chris, how do we each elevate future voices who want to join us, who want to tell their stories, and how do we really approach that? And for me, looking in the room, I love seeing y'all's faces. I do. But we don't have enough female perspectives in here, or non-binary, right? Like there's still not enough of representation within our own community. So we still have work to do. So I'm curious, Adrian, starting with you, how do you elevate voices, or how do you bring those voices even from our community that aren't showing up in the rooms yet, but we want more of?
Absolutely. I just finished a short sci-fi horror live action. I go back and forth. I go animation, live action. There's 2 projects we're working on now that's in Unreal. So it's just like this weird thing now where everything's merging together. But the last film I did, it started with the female protagonist. I really wanted to, think about what could we do with, what would Alien look like? Like it was almost that same question. I wanted a sci-fi horror with a Black female protagonist.
That's cool.
And because of the story, it deals with kind of like paleontology and understanding of history. So she's a paleontologist. It's just all these things I was writing out, and I wrote in the script like she's Black. Like I needed it because I needed people to kind of, even everyone that worked on that film, they needed to see that because in their heads, I wanted them to get used to that image. So when we got to set, it was just like everyone this is just what it was. There was nothing weird about that. And I just want to keep doing that. When I first started, I wasn't writing characters like that. You write characters kind of like yourself. And then as you get older, you're just like, wait a minute, I can do those things. I can make those changes,
Right.
My sister is a triathlon runner, and like she's stronger than any of us in our family. And, and every time I'm just like, see how, what she's doing and how she's working out like 3 times more than me and all of this stuff. And it's just like she's a hero in real life. Why don't I see that, in the world more often? So it's just it's that same thing, It's so weird that it's like there's almost a weird hierarchy when it comes to entertainment, where it's like white male protagonist first, white female protagonist, Black male protagonist, Black female protagonist. It's just literally a weird long list, and it's like and it just feels like Captain America will eventually get to that bottom of that list at some day, but it's still this weird hierarchy. And I feel like it's just a weird thing that we seem to organize ourselves into. And I feel we got to break it. We got to break it. Let's not let that happen according to order, to plan. Let's break it up. Let's just change these things. That's how you get great stories, right? It's just throwing people that we know exist into interesting, strange situations.
Yes, no, I love that. And I think that, all the time where I've gone to meetings where I've gotten letters from people where they write me after like, wow, I wasn't expecting to come in and see a Black woman there. Like they were like, this feels good. I didn't know that. So we need more in every part of the industry, right? In terms of representation, all levels throughout the pipeline, throughout our work. Fred, how are you feeling in terms of, I know you're in a very specific, making your own stories. How do you encourage others to make theirs? Or how do you see that perception of sharing that growth?
There's a couple of different ways. Periodically, like I'll have people reach out to me over social media, and I just try to be like encouraging, like being like, I know I'm probably like, the first person who looks like this doing this for you, and like, I didn't have that, so I really want to make sure that I can like pay that forward, like
responding to some of them DMs, man. Sometimes I'm like, I gotta respond to some of these. It's taxing, it's time consuming. I love that, Fred. Yeah, sometimes it's just sending a response. It is encouraging.
Yeah, and so every year on Black History Month, I'll go through and kind of find some more obscure, like continuing along the mission of doing Major Taylor, find some other less covered people in Black history. And starting a couple of years ago, I started doing only Black women for Black History Month. And then this year I did Black women plus LGBTQ. Because I want to broaden, and these are people I don't know either. It's as edifying for me as it would be for anyone, because I go out and I find them and I research them and I learn about them, and I don't learn about any of these people in school. You're just not going to.
Absolutely.
Also, before I forget, Adrian, you guys have a person of color on your money in Canada.
Yep.
Like I was
still working on.
I love it.
And I keep this next to my desk.
I want that, dude.
So inspired. You can't have mine.
Well,
No, that's so great. And Justin, you're developing a film. How are you thinking about in terms of your future crew, voices, perspectives?
It's something that is very important for us. Being the only, our characters are Black folks from Chicago. So we want that to be represented on our crew as well. Hard part is there's not a ton of us in the industry as it is. And
shout out to Kaylin Chalk in the chat over here. One of the few artists. So
it's hard as it is, and all them folks is busy because they're really good. We unfortunately have to be the best of the best of the best in order to get up here and stay up here. But Chris and I also teach, and while that is like financially, supplemental income for us, more importantly, it's how we find the next.
Yes.
That's how we find the next folks in the industry. Our classes are on projectcitytv.com. You can find us there. And we haven't taught in a while, but we're going to start kicking it back up again. But it's all about finding those nice people that we can pour, ourselves into. Our classes they don't cost as much as going to USC and UCLA, but we're teaching what they're not, and that's really how to get in from our perspective. So that's what we're trying to do, really build those, relationships with some of our, folks that are trying to break in, and teaming up with Adrian, teaming up with Fred, thinking about how can we do this, in a way, how can we?
Yes. And I'm and y'all heard the plug, sign up for Chris and Justin's School of Education. They're going to give you the real education. You can't, it's priceless. We have a lot of great questions coming from the Q&A. So I'm just going to jump in on a few. So this question comes from Benjamin. Is a really graphic story content a good idea to put out there?
In terms of like violence and
it's I'm reading fresh, but I think that it's really like, is it really graphic? Is it too much? Maybe in terms of who the audiences are. Do you all find that it's really important to think of less graphic storytelling?
I think that's a question for you, but
Well, I think to be honest, I think that there's a lot of ways to get content out there today. There's obviously theatrical, but there's also streaming, there's YouTube, there's the internet. So I think truly we do have, a lot more avenues to get out there. It's really about finding your audience. There is a business aspect, of course, where people are going to be targeting certain audience sizes, but I think it's really about passion and really knowing if you come in with the passion to tell a story, it's going to come through in the creativity.
The question of if it's putting something really graphic out there, that's a question of, can I show a thing? And I think the reality of that is, if you're telling a good story, you can show anything to tell that story. You know what I mean? So that's quickly what I sort of go to is, if you're just doing it and it's graphic for the sake of being graphic, but it's not telling a story, then you're just showing a thing. But if you're telling a story, you can show anything you want in order to tell it. So that's my perspective. Now, will people be interested in it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Try it out. Try it out.
Ask your friends. And that's the thing, like, run your ideas by people you know. You know, at the end of the day, people want to feel something when they watch any kind of content. Absolutely. We want to feel the emotion. We want to connect to the characters. So as long as it serves the story you're trying to tell, that's the way to go. But if it's just for shock value, sometimes that's not going to land with the people you're trying to touch.
Hey, Stevie, real quick. Somebody in the comments asked, what are tips for pitching unique Black African stories? And when buyers keep asking how will the wider audience relate and connect, I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, please.
For a little bit with you guys' input. I think that if you are starting from a place of, I want to pitch unique Black African stories, you're probably going to miss a lot of people. I think, but if you're starting from a place of, what have I gone through? What has my ancestors gone through? What have my people gone through that people can relate to? And then go from there, you're going to capture a lot of your audience. And believe me, we hear a lot of times about, like, you know, capturing a wider audience. And we shut those conversations down very quickly, because at the end of the day, our story is about people, you know, and the journey that they are going through. So if you start from that place, can you start from a place of, this is a story that anybody in any time in history can grasp, then you're going to capture a very wide audience. You know, if you start there with that foundation and build on top of it, you're going to go, you know, really, really far. I just didn't want the chat to go too far down without asking.
Yeah, no, I'm getting a bunch of questions too. I'm like, oh, I'm going to catch up. So thank you, Justin. No, and it's true. I, you know, there's been people in the history who have been like, okay, I got a story for you. And they pitched 3 totally different check boxes of, like, there's a girl over here and she's this, oh, there's a boy over there and there's that. And it's really clear when you don't have a central passion for some story you're trying to tell. So I love the idea of not thinking about the audience and losing track of the creative passion and heart, because that comes through like that. You can tell when someone wants to create something from the heart versus for the audience, because audiences, they're tough. They feel it right away. They know when it's real. And just like how we see each other, we know when we see ourselves on screen and it's not us. I'm like, who did this? I'm gonna look up the picture. I can know right away. I'm like, yep. I thought so. So it's hard. It's hard out here. Just a more open question from Marsha Thomas. You know, what software or programs or tools, education that you guys find more useful in terms of coming up in your career? Is there any advice you have for people just trying to look at those tools and software programs?
Yeah, I mean, like, I started off in fine arts. So, you know, pencils and ink, really, you know, and then from there, Photoshop, then from there, ZBrush, then from there, Maya. You know, now I'm doing a lot of stuff with Unreal. So it's, you know, I think that these days you almost have to have an active mind, and it's more important, you know, to have a need to learn than it is to just be really good at one thing. Because I think, you know, and even the programs that I started, they're so different than when I started. So they've evolved too. And then they did other programs come out that are cheaper for free. And it's just kind of exploding right now to the point where it's like, I got a list of all these programs I got to learn and catch up. And I'm always feeling like I'm behind. But, you know, it is still, but I think that's just what it means to be an artist now. There's no thing where it's like, all right, got my degree, I'm just going to do this now forever. That's just not how it works anymore. You got to be up to task. You got to see what people are doing, you know, and hey, tutorials are free now. When I started, they weren't. I had to go to a very only, you know, I can't even, digital tutors and like, you know, pay for tutorials. And whereas now it's just like, I don't know how to do this one specific thing. I'm going to, like, you know, Google the long sentence. And then you'll be like, you know, a whole list of people that have the same question. So it's, you know, it's just so much easier these days to learn. But it does take discipline, I'll say. It isn't easy to just pick up a new skill. It does take time. It's going to be frustrating. But, you know, that's that's just kind of what this industry is. And I think it especially the passion, you'll drive through that.
Yeah.
So.
And art school's hella expensive. Film school's hella expensive. I love that you're talking about. There's way more access now. There's way more ways to learn. Build your network, build your community. Mentorship comes from all directions, y'all. Your friends can mentor you, people on the crew, people who you're overseeing. I think that there's no shortage of good ideas and support that comes from the community that we have. So, you know, I think when I think about resources and me growing up in a stressful, expensive school, you know, knowing today and the access that there are, like, don't give up. There's so much out there. You just Google stuff. I Google stuff. I'm like, that's how you do that program.
On the real, every day. And our class costs 1% of what it costs to go to art school, you know. And I'm at work. I'm on DreamWorks campus right now, so I'm just throwing that out there. You know, there's the patience. Adrian, you talked about, you know, like the persistence. I keep going, but also being patient with yourself. You're not going to do this tomorrow. It's going to take years, you know.
Yes. Yeah. And I think just believe in yourselves. I mean, at least things like this, even watching and listening in, knowing it's possible, knowing that it's a hard path for everybody. So I appreciate everybody here talking about their journey, their passions, their goals, and know that if you're listening, you can do it too. You can do it, and you can show us how to do it. In a few years, we'll all be working for you. It's cyclical. So be nice to people. Don't be a jerk.
Be nice to yourself. Be nice to yourself. And the thing that you love. Don't let the pursuit get in the way of the passion. Remember that you love creating. Remember that you love creating, because Justin and I and the seats that we're in now, we sit and laugh about it sometimes, where when our job was literally just a storyboard. And now, because we have a vision for certain things, there are little windows where I'm like, I see this thing a certain way, let me board it out. And I'm reminded of sitting at the table with my brother where we were younger and we were just drawing, and that love for it. Please remember that, man. It gets said so often, but it gets forgotten way more than it gets said. Remember that you love creating and keep doing it, because it doesn't matter what program, you'll find the one that I literally will start a drawing in Storyboard Pro, take it, move it to my iPad, work on it in Procreate, and then move it back to finish it in Photoshop. And that's all because I love doing it. I just love drawing like crazy. So please remember that you love it. Please.
Yes. And tell the stories you want to tell. Take a page from Fred's book.
Yeah.
Okay. Get some more stories of it that we forgot about or we need to know about. So thank you all for coming together. Time flies when you're having fun. I had fun. I was like, dang, what are we doing later? No. Okay. Apparently I got to get back to work. They're like, where is she? Why is she not answering my emails? No, this is worth it. We want to thank everybody and our sponsors again for AfroAnimation, for DreamWorks Animation for helping us out with this panel. Fred, Adrian, Chris, Justin, nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Stevie. Amazing job.
Thank you.
Brother Adrian, brother Fred, pleasure meeting you guys, man. I'm looking forward to following you guys and tracking what you said.
I will be in touch with all of you.
Yes, we'll find each other, stay close. And we're going to kick it off to Rio. So thanks again.
Stevie, nice work. I knew you were able to keep those men in check.
That's my day job, girl. That's what I do.
I'm so excited that there were so many more women in the audience. I mean, things that you guys were saying were resonating. You talked about Black women. You talked about Black stories. Fred, you know, you're like the OG illustrator. I love you for that. So for everybody who's never met Fred, go to frednolan.com and see some of his work. AdrianBob.com. I kind of just call Adrian that. I don't even call him Adrian anymore. It's just like kind of AdrianBob.com. And then of course, amazing stories. Justin and Chris, I'm telling you, you have no idea, or maybe you do, how inspiring your stories are. I mean, when you say, you know, your education was probably not at the level as other folks who think that they have to go down a traditional path. This is what we're talking about here at AfroAnimation. We are excited to share non-traditional paths. And so the morning has been flying by. I mean, Stevie has been sort of our hostess with the mostest, starting off with developing original animation series and movies. And then how adorable are the Craig of the Creek folks? I mean, my son is 15, but I'm going to start watching Craig of the Creek. I watched it.
Yeah, so good.
And so good. I'm telling you, the stories they tell, just being a mom, a Black mom, I wish there were more Craig of the Creek stories to tell when my son was younger. And then, my gosh, having 5 Disney recruiters in the room, I felt like, gosh, I don't know which one to send my resume to. I'm just going to send it to all of them.
There you go.
So, really special panel there with all the 5 studios at Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, Disney Television Animation. So just really excited about where the sponsors are. So now I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to ask our producer in the back to start kicking people off stage. So you guys are getting the hook. Thank you. So now we have a break. And if you are on the Hopin platform, to the left of the platform, you will see something marked sessions, something marked Expo networking. If you click into Expo, you will find a lot of the studios having recruiting sessions in their booths. You will go into their booths and find content. So take the next hour or so till about 3 o'clock and check out all the booths to the left in the expo. And then at 3 o'clock, we're going to kick off the afternoon with understanding the basic building blocks of the metaverse and the metaverses and NFTs. So we're excited about the morning so far. And we're excited that if you guys could join us in the booths to the left of your screen, and we're all set. So thank you so much from AfroAnimation, and we'll see you in about an hour.